Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Papal, and this is the continuation of the Papal After Action Report done by Daniel Tollmann in the Victoria 3 Discord. Again, you should join that Discord if you want to see more After Action Reports. Today we are going to discuss the second part of it. There are 3 parts in total. We will see a good ending or the bad ending depending on which side you are on, but primarily we are going to be talking about the mechanics that are visible right here in this Victoria 3 After Action Report. This is the prestigious Pope, so just remember the goal is basically to become a great power, to be amazing, just through the power of art, otherwise also called prestige spam. We've seen a lot, but I can tell you that it only gets hotter as we continue through here part 2 and then tomorrow through part 3. Now let's start with what he has to say initially. I've played a little more without updating, so here's a quick summary. With our increase in power rank and continued efforts to improve relations, Tuscany has finally agreed to enter a customs union. This, in my opinion, is interesting. First of all, they just agreed to enter customs union. Now, it has to be said, becoming a member of a customs union isn't directly, reminiscent of the spheres of influence in Victoria 2, although it does seem that way initially, because yes, the spheres of influence basically did that. They added people to your market, you had first buy right, and so on. But a customs union in itself can just mean, hey, it is closer cooperation. It could even be equal. Alright, so I just looked it up, and this is a pact. So this is something, that is basically a decision between both of them that lasts until somebody interrupts it. And this customs union is a top-down relationship, so there is a senior and a junior partner. In this case, the Papal States are the senior partner, and the junior partner is Tuscany. And the entire cost of this pact, so who pays for the fact that this customs union has been established, is carried by the senior partner, meaning that there's a pretty big incentive for Tuscany to do this, even if Tuscany loses market autonomy in whatever way. I have to assume, and this is a guess, we don't actually know that, but I have to assume that the senior partner, since they are paying for the cost of it, right, probably also set the tariffs. Maybe there's an influence between, back and forth between the both of them, but I doubt that. I would argue that the senior partner probably is indeed in control of the actual tariffs and whatnot. So that is quite interesting. This is something that the AI is just willing to do, and it isn't directly a subject relationship in any sense. It could lead to one, of course, but it's quite interesting because usually cooperation on this tight a level, I mean, it's basically impossible unless you are forcing them into it in other games, right? So this is pretty interesting to see that Tuscany just says, yeah, I would love to join your customs union. Their economy is much more developed than the minor countries currently in our market. Remember, they added Modena, they added Parma, and so on. Their economy is much more developed, right. They produce a lot of clothes, including luxury clothes, as they have their own silk plantations. So that is a pretty strong industry that is rivaling the one of the Papal States. So it could be bad for the pops that are working in these silk plantations that Daniel prepared himself. They also bring with them a hugely better source of iron, as well as yet more potential for sulfur mining. They even have their own university. I have continued to expand our arts academies to the point that the national budget can barely afford the cost, even with our new per capita tax laws, so these did actually pass. I did this to pursue a redacted that made Rome the center of the realist movement, greatly improving the throughput of the academies and therefore our prestige. So, let me just change this first of all. Let me just change it so that you see the image. The image is otherwise a bit distorted. That's just the price you pay when you do this sort of collage that I'm doing here. But this is the Arts Academy of Lazio. It has become a major center of the realist movement, producing some of the finest works of our generation. Realism depicts the world as it is, as warts and all, rather than the world as we might like it to be. It seeks not only to be true to how objects appear to the eye, but also to be true to the everyday experiences of ordinary people. The effect here is Papal States get supporting the realist movement for 5 years, plus 25% Arts Academy building throughput. Finally, art we can relate to. Now, this is interesting. I don't know exactly what this is. Obviously, it literally reads, it literally says redacted, right? So, very difficult to even guess what it could be. But I like this idea that this decision actually is a decision. It's not just an event. Notice how there are 2 possible things that you can press. My suspicion here is that the Arts Academy and the realist movement, and he has done this, he has done this very proactively. It says, I did this to pursue, that made Rome the center of the realist movement. I would guess that this is tightly related to the journal system, and the journal system as I currently interpret it, and we didn't have the dev diary. It's supposedly coming out this January, so maybe next week, maybe the week after, we'll see about that. But I am suspecting that journals and the way the event systems within these journals are basically societal quests, if you will, given by interest groups, given just by specific characters maybe that spawned in your country, and giving the opportunity to get something similar to, for example, great works, maybe an Imperator, where it's a permanent modifier, right? So I'm talking about a long-term project that you invest in, that you need to consciously choose to do. or they could be something rather reminiscent of EU4 institutions. I have been thinking about that. I think institutions as a whole is a topic that is really interesting. I think EU4, it's my favorite part of EU4. I will tell you that by far. And my suspicion, and let me just return to this image here, my suspicion is basically that the arts academies, triggering a realist movement could be similar to the chance of you triggering an institution in EU4. The effect would be that there might be institutions here that you don't want, which is why this decision here is a decision. So it's a choice between, yes, I will support this, and no, I will oppose this. There might be, for example, an influence, that the realist movement also does something else. The realist movement might make more politically conscious pops, they stop being inactive and so on. And sometimes it could be something like, oh, look at that, we found socialism. Karl Marx just wrote a book here. Do you want to support that, or do you want to oust him? I think that could be an interesting dynamic. Is that the way it works? Is this what redacted is? Listen, I have no idea, but that is just my suspicion. Let me know what you think. I personally think that this might be tightly connected to the journals and, of course, maybe to the institution system, if there is such a thing as institutions, right? Basically, a bit of a combination between innovations in Victoria 2 that would just randomly trigger and institutions that you can somewhat direct into a direction, for EU4 and maybe in the journal system in Victoria 3. Now, let's continue, because all of that was conjecture. I want to make that clear as well. I would be excited if I was correct, but I have no idea whether I am. That's powerful. It is very powerful, though it has brought the national budget to its breaking point to achieve this. We are on the precipice of greatness. The 9th most prestigious country in the world, we only need to jump up one more spot to become a great power. So he starts talking about spots here, but as I understand it, there isn't the limit from 1 to 8. So on Victoria 2, you only have 8 great powers. You have number 1 to number 8, right? And now he's talking about how he's the 9th most prestigious country, and if he gets higher up, then he will be the 8th, and then he's a great power. The way Victoria 3 appeared to be doing it, at least according to the Dev Diary, right, was not based on your position, but rather on your relation, how big prestige or how much prestige do you have in comparison to the world leader in prestige. I don't think that changed. Maybe it's just a misnomer, basically a misphrasing. Who knows? It's difficult to say, but I would rely on the stuff that we've learned from the Dev Diaries, right? Oh, the Academy hasn't even fully employed since I expanded it, and victory. Power rank changed. We are now a great power. Let's talk about that for a second. So, he says right underneath this, Papal States great power in 1844, right? We are 8 years into the game. The Papal States, which are still very much a middling power, think about it, and I think I can scroll down and we will see an image of it. Or is that in the next one? Yeah, it's long, you can see. But these are the Papal States that we will have as soon as he annexes everybody in his market, right? This is very obvious, I think. I think everybody understands this. We had Parma, Modena here, we had Tuscany right there, I believe, in the Papal States as we started. Is this a great power? I mean, obviously not. That is not a great power. This is a paper tiger, there's nothing behind it. We are only 8 years in, and yet we are called a great power. Now, I will tell you, I find it maybe a bit immersion breaking, I guess, that they could be considered a great power, but then again, if you are very influential in the artwork, in the scientific world, maybe that is actually the sort of vibe that you would be giving off and that people would respect you more. But I think gameplay-wise, this is negligible. So I made this clear in the last video as well, that I did not enjoy Prestige Spam in Victoria 2. I don't think it was a good implementation. I think it was very unbalanced. I think it was way too must-have for many, many countries that really need a sphere of influence. But in Victoria 3, him investing everything, breaking the bank to become a great power, I don't think that's worth it. And I think you can do that, and if you want to do it, then you should feel free to do it. It's cool. I have nothing against it, because the actual gameplay benefits aren't too huge. What you get from being a great power are, of course, diplomatic bonuses. People respect you more. Okay, fair enough. That is pretty good, right? But the rest that you get is more maneuvers in diplomatic plays. So in a diplomatic play, you can ask more people to join you, and you can try to get them to drop or rather to accept war goals, that sort of stuff. You get more maneuvers in the phase before the war. Is that all that impressive? I don't think it is. It's important if you are a world-spanning empire and you have a lot of goals in one war. Yes, absolutely, but I mean, the Papal States can't really use that, right? There's no benefit here. He could have had a customs union with a different state as well, even if he wasn't a great power. What else is in there? He can declare more strategic zones. Do we really think that the Papal States in this state are able to go out and defend their interests worldwide by declaring interests in Iran, in, for example, South Africa, in South America? Obviously not, right? So the way I see this is, you can do prestige spam It took him, and this is all, the numbers are, of course, due to change, you know, this is all unbalanced, it will be rebalanced and so on. But what has to be said here is, even if this was the release date, you can become a great power insanely easily. Do you get the same amount, the same degree of benefits that you got in Victoria 2? Absolutely not. So I personally will tell you I'm pretty fine with this. I also do want to say that when I say this might be rebalanced at launch, it might completely look, you know, completely differently. This could be the case, but I will also tell you, as somebody that has played these games since 2005, that be aware that with the release version will have things that are insanely unbalanced. You can't catch everything with games of this complexity. It won't happen. It won't occur. There will be bugs. Be aware of this, otherwise you're going to set yourself up for disappointment as well. So even if this is in the game, though, I would personally say it's not too bad. I wanted to bring that up because, you know, the topic of prestige spam, if you've played Victoria 2, should be very important to you. Mostly because it was such a boring way of playing the game, but you had to play the game in a way in this direction. Here, you totally don't have to do that. He could have given up his own market for France's market, become an economic powerhouse, and not be a paper tiger by then actually financing an army, right? That stuff is possible. He just didn't do that because he wanted to do art spam, and it worked. But again, the benefit is not large enough for me to basically be sad about this. I think this is a pretty interesting playthrough because it showcases that you can achieve it, but it doesn't make you or it doesn't make it into a must-have situation like it did in Victoria 2. Now, I don't think we're quite done yet. I want to see my semi-unification plan through. Right, so here at this moment he's planning to not unify Italy, but to unify a good chunk of it. That sounds broken. Yeah, we'll definitely want to balance this some more, though worth bearing in mind that I devoted pretty much the entire national budget of a mid-sized nation to nothing but the production of art in order to achieve this. A great power rank isn't worth the ink it's printed on due to my utter lack of military or even economic power. I am a great power in name only. You know, as much as I just talked about this and stand by, of course, the idea that the great power rank isn't as influential as it might have been in Victoria 2 and therefore makes it fairly okay to become a great power even if you are fairly minimal, you know, a mid-sized power, I will say maybe there should be, so if you, let's say you get for any diplomatic offer, and I don't know whether this is in any form in the game, but let's say you make a diplomatic offer and if you are a great power, it gets a general greater acceptance rate of +20, right? So it's an opinion modifier in that sense. Maybe you want to dial that down if the prestige that you have as a nation is far away from an equilibrium. So, right, we have military, we have a GDP, and then we have prestige. Those are the main factors. I believe there are other factors as well, your subjects, for example, that sort of stuff, but those are the main factors. And if they aren't fairly balanced out in how they contribute prestige, maybe the world will say, okay, you are a great power, but this +20 becomes a +15, maybe a +10, right? I would kind of like that. Is it necessary? I don't know. I have no idea about the balancing, but that's an interesting thought, at least wanted to bring that up. But yeah, you are still a great power, indeed. I'm now going to continue to stretch the budget by expanding my university, which I'm doing so I can research nationalism faster, which then will be aiding him in unifying Italy. I just got a trade agreement with France. What that exactly means, we don't know. We haven't covered trade yet in the dev diaries. This is quite nice since France was already my go-to trading partner and it helps improve relations further, so with any luck France would help us out in a conflict. That's pretty good. Having good relationships on this level, which is also threatening you if you think about it, because it does give them easier access to your market, right? But having access on this level will make it so that they become your allies later, so you need to give them something, in this case sacrifice some of your market autonomy in order to for them to become your ally. This is highly economic and diplomatically beneficial. Both Sicilies might agree to join the market now with a great power status. Yeah, no. Two Sicilies views Papal states as in need of their protection in geopolitical affairs. They are likely to intervene on our side in diplomatic plays and may offer Papal states to become their subjects. See, I love this. Are two Sicilies a great power? No. But they still look at the Papal states. They look at them, okay, yeah, you are a great power, but you're not a great power, right? So, hey, my example with the offer is already somewhat in the game. I'm a big fan of this. I will tell you outright, I think the power thing, the power distribution where you need a certain percentage of the leader of the world and then you can become a great power and so on, that already is pretty neat. But the fact that Two Sicily still says, Papal states, yes, you are a great power, but you're gonna be my subject if necessary, right? That is so much better than anything that we had in Victoria 2. It is much less rigorous. It makes it so that you can actually have a robust system where people recognize, and by people I mean the AI, where the AI recognizes that you are nothing but a paper tiger. Two Sicilies is a power in their own right, and they correctly see themselves as the stronger nation. If I can ever get my economy fixed, I could build an army to conquer them or something, but that's a very long way off. So right now he has basically nothing. I believe we were talking about 5 battalions. Is it time to build military to protect a great power status then? With what money? Art is really expensive. We finally have a university worthy of some sort of renown. The Pope himself has officially opened the University of Lazio. Academia is beginning to flourish in Papal States. This could just be an event, but it kind of reminds me of this exact phrasing, but that could just be how they write events, right? Basically, I'm not entirely certain. Anyway, there's a university now, so that is quite large, and it seems to give a modifier for the intelligentsia in the Papal States. Is University of Oxford already in the Great Britain market? Both Oxford and Cambridge are hugely more advanced universities than Rome, unfortunately. Great Britain is way ahead in the tech game. Between the two, they have 10 levels of university in Britain. I have 2. Yeah, that's a huge modifier. They did bring up that the way the tax system works, and I think this is something that is showcased here and the way it should work. The way the tax system works basically is working in a way where most countries will not finish the tech tree until the game is over. Or rather, actually, they won't finish it at all when the game is over, right? They won't be finished. And I think that's a good thing. I think it makes it so that most countries aren't looking at the situation, but there are a certain amount of countries that are really causing tech to spread, that are really going out there, dishing it out, right? And Great Britain, of course, is one of them. I mean, they start as the biggest power and they end as the biggest power in this time frame, so that makes a lot of sense. I really do like this angle here as well, that Britain is so damn far ahead. In most other games, especially, for example, if you look at EU4, as long as you belong to one cultural research area, you basically look at parity when it comes to research. Here, you're definitely not doing that. You can't just be the Pope and immediately be further ahead in technology than Britain. It just doesn't really make any sense. At least Britain hasn't discovered dialectics yet, else the universities would be supercharged. So I assume this basically makes it so that you get faster research speed, right? Research dialectics, Meta confirmed. Researching the capacity for faster research is always going to be an appealing prospect, but like everything else, there's opportunity cost. Of course, you could be working on your economy, but you know, I will tell you, I do think that Great Britain probably can afford to always go for research because their economy is expected, at least until Germany is around, until maybe France kicks in Germany's teeth, if they get to do that, right? Until then, I think Great Britain is the doubtlessly first force on the actual international market. Right, for reasons I'm not entirely sure about, Umbria has just about the highest standard of living in Europe. I usually look at Paris for a standard of living benchmark, but something seems to have gone wrong over there. People are starving in Paris. That's odd. AI France has shut down all industry in Paris except for a massive furniture industry that churns out inexpensive luxury chairs. While that does improve average standard of living due to cheap pop demands, the people working in those factories are not well paid due to supply greatly eclipsing demand. And since everyone in Paris works in the furniture industry, it is a very poor city. So, obviously, the AI is a disaster artist right here. They're not having a good time, and this will happen. I mean, this is just a bug, you know, wrong decision making basically. And you will see this, but I only think in part 3, have a big effect on the decision making process in France itself. Maybe France wanted to sell you fancy chairs. I've actually begun to make my own fancy chairs. Between Rome and Tuscany, silk is vaguely affordable in the Roman market now. Only vaguely though. Now that I have the academies, universities and administrations that I needed in Rome, I'll start expanding the silk plantations to make my luxury good industries more viable. As an aside, the current law I'm trying to pass is agrarianism. This isn't a great law for my purpose either, but it beats traditionalism, so this is economy, and unlocks better tax laws. Economic reform is a very slow process since I haven't been focusing on major social change that would make faster reform possible. Looking overseas, the United Sovereign Archduchy, so the Empire of the United States, led by Emperor Mason Wall, and I don't want to be the guy that ruins the fun. I get it, USA, right? But why is he called an emperor if it's just an archduchy? Emperor Mason Warland describes itself as a constitutional empire. Its leading interest group is the petite bourgeoisie. Japan seems to be having a civil war. Both sides are led by members of the Tokugawa clan. So this is not the major restoration. This is just a situation, basically a civil war within the shogunate. Exciting times in the USA. A Republican revolt has broken out. Look at them go. So we see here, first of all, we see Upper Canada. I believe this is Lower Canada, and meaning Quebec. This is the United Sovereign Archduchy. This is also the United Sovereign Archduchy, and this is where the revolt spawned. So this is obviously a civil war scenario, right? We have the United Sovereign Archduchy versus Revolutionary America, which appears to be Republican. So the name Revolutionary America is probably temporary. This just means that they are the revolution in the country right now. The other one is the legitimate government. At least I would assume so. I doubt that they will be called Revolutionary America after restoring it, since every United States of America is a USA, and probably would just go back to United States, let's be real. The capital of the emperor is right here, so Washington, D.C., and then they chose Philadelphia as the capital for the rebels. I really like this, and this is not a secret. We've talked about this in Dev Diary, so this has been out for a while, but the way Victoria 3 will be handling rebellions is significantly better than anything else. We saw a small teaser of this already in, I believe, one of the new Steam screenshots, where basically we have a situation, okay, listen, we have an interest group, we have certain pops, and they are very unhappy, they are radicalized, they will do a rebellion. And when they are rebelling, you can choose which side you want to play on, right? Do you want to stick with the country that you already are, or do you want to stick with the new state that wants to form a different type of government, you know, be it a republic, a dictatorship, or anything of that sort? Obviously, it stands to reason, is this reasonable to have this sort of revolution going on in the United States of America? But again, that's balancing issues, don't worry about that too much. Having a bit of a chaos AI, unbalanced stuff, right? That's very normal. I would, for example, assume maybe the numbers for pop unhappiness aren't tweaked right now, and then everybody's just constantly unhappy unless they're controlled by a player, meaning they will just rebel all the time. That could be the case, I'm not entirely certain. Maybe they just misproduced, meaning there was a lot of poverty and then everybody rebelled, that sort of thing. Either way, it doesn't really matter, because again, it's all work in progress. None of this is done, none of this is out, none of this is balanced. But the interesting thing is you could play either. Now let's think back, let's think about Imperator Rome. Imperator Rome does it in a way where basically it says, if you lose against a rebellion, your game is over. I hate that. I really do. I really hate that. Victoria 2 does it in a way where it basically never lets you play a rebellion unless you let them succeed, but for that you need to actively just do nothing. And let me just reseat myself here. There we go. Unless you let them succeed, they just spam their 1 million troops. I've had that happen. Of course, Spain in Victoria 2 in vanilla on the beta patch is a very common case of having infinite rebellions, and when you see 3 million Spaniards in Madrid just sieging it down, all part of different rebellions, it's complete nonsense. Rebel stomping as a whole is something that grand strategy games should leave behind. It's also very, very annoying in CK3 when you have, oh, look at that, it's a peasants rebellion, and you just stomp them one by one by one. Very, very annoying, very boring. It's not really engaging gameplay, because you will win unless you just don't really understand the game, which is fine, right? It's a challenge to new players, and that has to be acknowledged. But in Victoria 3, this is very different. In Victoria 3, a civil war is actually fought between two entities, similar to Hearts of Iron 4, for example. But in Victoria 3, of course, the civil wars aren't just carried by, oh, look at that, your share of the pie of ideology was 33%, so that's how much of the country you get. No, this is carried by which pops support this movement, how many pops support the movement. Your actual society decides to go to war, rather than just a pie chart that you had a number increase and so on. This is really cool. This is the best civil war system yet, just in general. I do wonder how many people would die in such a war, because this is a rather significant war, at least I would argue. Bankroll them. Right, two problems with that. I've not invented central banking. That is a tech, as we know, that you require for bankrolling. And two, I have no money. Art is expensive. The literacy rate in the meantime is much better now, but still pretty terrible. 34.5%. That is up from, I believe, like 17% it was yesterday, right? That's pretty good. I'm not sure that our current education system will push literacy much higher than what it is now. That is because the institution, as I said yesterday as well, of religious schools is less effective than, actual proper public schools. And more importantly, he probably only has level 1 or 2, something like that anyway. Unlike in previous builds, you can now invest in religious schools up to max level, but I'm capped at 3 due to my child labor law. So he is at 3 and he can't go any higher because child labor keeps children from going to school, which makes a lot of sense, if you will. It is a bit of an abstraction, of course, but it definitely gets the job done. And there's really no support for banning child labor, meaning he can't bring religious schools up to par with any other public school system right now. Wait, what are you doing to the children? Presumably, they work in the silk plantations, or maybe they're all apprentices to our world-renowned artists. The price of silk just will not stabilize. I keep making more, but that just encourages other countries to buy it when I prefer to remain within my market. My economic laws do not allow me to restrict exports, so this is pretty cool. Obviously, it reminds me very much of Victoria 2's laissez-faire of free trade and whatnot, basically how much intervention abilities do you have within your country, but this is not done via parties in government now. So just because I have liberals in government, and it doesn't really exist like that, but let's say, for example, the petite bourgeoisie or the industrialists, just because they're in government doesn't mean that we are looking at laws that actually allow me to just export everything, to have no tariffs or to have tariffs, that sort of stuff. No, you need to change the laws, so that is pretty neat, and you can't change the laws right now, meaning that there is no restriction to exports. So this will be a big impact and a big factor, and yet again, there's an added notion here, right? In Victoria 2, if you needed to fix your economy so that you could later on go to war, so you would be prepared, that sort of stuff, you could exchange your government. I mean, ideally, right? If you were a pure democracy, that could be difficult, although you could also force it with certain exploits, depending on what you do in the game, but Primarily what I'm talking about is that in most countries, especially early on, especially with the papal states, you would just exchange your government and all of a sudden, boom, you have somebody that allows tariffs to the maximum. Here it is different. Here, restricting exports will actually require you to pass a law, and then you can restrict exports to a degree that, of course, depends on what law you just passed. I really love that. This goes much, much further, but again, and I do want to stress this, makes it so that caring for your economy just got much more hands-on. You need to do more things because there are more complex things rather than just tariffs on everything between minus 100% and plus 100%. Instead of that, it is per, item. It is maybe even per trade route, that sort of stuff. Very interesting stuff. So I can run my luxury goods industries, but their input costs are fairly expensive and not as efficient as they could be. Would agrarianism help with restricting exports? Only luxury goods, unfortunately. Oh, that's interesting. So agrarianism does let you restrict the exports of luxury goods. I think I'd need mercantilism to have the control I want. Oh, or command economy, but that's entirely beyond my reach. What year is it? It's 1845. We have mass communication, which means we can finally start researching nationalism. Very good. The capitalists who run my one and only luxury furniture factory are insanely wealthy. Look at this. Lavish 59. They are incredibly rich, which of course gives them a lot of clout. Hadn't been keeping track of my IGs for a while. Turns out that if you orient an entire nation towards art production, and I can't read anymore, the academic types who make the art and run the universities become quite powerful. There are liberals everywhere. And this is interesting. And he goes on to say this here, and let's just take a look at this. If the liberals start any political movements, I'd be pretty open to give them what they want, though I will not cave in the theocracy law. We're sticking with the Pope. This is quite interesting. Liberals in the sense of course, this time period, right, would very much, at least would be very likely to basically say, okay, we care for free speech first, all that sort of stuff, and if you deny it to them, they may radicalize and go against your entire government form. So this is actually a pretty interesting way. The Pope can surround himself with liberals, but he can still stay a theocracy. Maybe at some point a constitutional, parliamentary theocracy, whatever that means, right? Instead of a monarch, you just have the Pope as the head of state, but you are still in control via your parliament, that sort of stuff. But that is pretty cool. You can actually have these people, you can have liberals all around you, and as long as you give them at least, freedom of speech, you can do this. If you were running a different build here, where you say, I want to stay an absolute autocracy, I want to stay the Pope that can do and say whatever they want, you couldn't play with this art playstyle, because all of a sudden you have liberals that demand free speech, that demand the right to assembly, that demand electoral laws, that sort of stuff, and you wouldn't say yes, right? And then they radicalize and you have a civil war at your hands. That is really interesting. But for now, the only active movements are to install a monarchy for some reason and to preserve our terrible traditionalism law. Neither movement is popular or radical. Downside of my trade agreement with France, they can buy my silk more easily. And there you go, this is exactly what we talked about, but it makes it so that France might join, his diplomatic plays more often. What I was also thinking about, this is actually something that we were talking and thinking about a lot, but it has never been elaborated upon, at least as far as I know. Please do let me know. But let's say, for example, that I am fully in the French market, right? It's not just a trade agreement, I'm fully in the French market. And at the same time, Parma, for example, or, Tuscany are also in the French market. Does this mean, if I go to war with Modena, that we both still can fully trade with one another because we're in the same market and the market access is what determines whether I have access to a good? Does that do that? Is it blocking my, exports from them, or I don't know. That is a question that I also had. If you do know, was that elaborated upon anywhere, then definitely let me know. I've been wondering about that for a couple of months now. The Republican side of the American Civil War is winning, so the Republic will be back. When will the agrarianism reform pass? Could be years. It's painfully slow. Yeah, reforming in the Papal States appears to not be a good, or rather a fast task. And agrarianism is only something I'm doing to unlock better tax laws, which will themselves take a long time to pass. Wow, Emperor Mason stands no chance at all, which makes sense since the Republican sees nearly all the actually developed states, except for like New York. Italians demand more wine, building more vineyards, so he goes further into the cultural obsession right there. I think it's a good time to ask what will happen to Emperor Mason if he were to lose. It will not go well for him. And I brought this up yesterday as well. I want to just reaffirm and confirm this point. As you can see, if Emperor Mason Woodlands is cut out, if he's defeated, you can assume he is in exile, he is dead, he rescinded his claim, he just became a normal citizen. You can assume anything because he's not coming back. The game does not save him as a potential claimant that could reclaim the throne. No, the game just says, you're gone, you're out of the window. Should there be another United States Archduchy, United Sovereign Archduchy, should there be another one, it will be a randomly generated emperor again. And as I said, yeah, I wish it weren't so, but yeah, somebody actually commented yesterday, and I think that's a good point. What if you're looking at a situation where, you know, hey, okay, you don't get the same person, it's not kept track of, but maybe that can be expanded upon later. I agree that it's not vital. I completely agree. This is not an issue that has to be resolved before launch. I don't think it's that vital, you know. There are other things like parties, for example, that must be done first. So ultimately, yeah, I'm fine, but, you know, with this, but just make sure that you understand and that you realize this is the way it is, because again, let's have no illusions about the game. Let's just be clear about what it is. Are there foreign powers involved in the Civil War? And this is cool. Great Britain supports the Empire, but they don't seem to be actually lending much of a hand. Who knows, maybe they're busy somewhere else, maybe it's an AI thing, but ultimately you can't win every war, even if you are Great Britain, which is the great thing, by the way, about the way warfare is structured in this game, where actually bringing armies somewhere and actually winning a war is something that you do as a long-term commitment, right? So if Great Britain brings their troops to the United States of America, and let's say they bring 50% of their army, and maybe 50% of the fleet, or maybe all of their fleet, and they are assigned to missions there, and then France declares war on them, Britain will have a difficult time to mobilize any troops that they have in time to the French warfare scenario, right? Whether that is in the colonies, whether that is an invasion in actual Great Britain, that sort of stuff. Difficult to say. But the interesting section about this is, in my opinion at least, that they can't, you know, if I play Victoria 2, for example, if I help the AI, I can basically bring as many troops as I need, because if somebody else declares war against me, which won't really happen because the troop can't or the enemy can't calculate in troop commitment when they declare a war. They don't know that my troops aren't next door. They are very far away, right? In Victoria 2, they can't see that. They just see, oh, his military number is very high, I will not attack him. But if they were to attack me, they wouldn't win the war fast enough, in which I couldn't come back and just dunk on them. In Victoria 3, this may be different because total war is dead. Carpet sieging isn't the case. All of a sudden, you just have more realistic wars. I really, really love this. Great Britain is helping somebody, but, I mean, okay, in Victoria 2, Great Britain was never a great help. But what I'm saying is, this commitment that they can bring up doesn't have to be a lot, because they need to keep their troops ready in case anybody else declares war, in case any rebellion breaks out, that sort of stuff. You do not have this in a microsystem. I'm a huge fan of it for this very reason. What is your market like? Things are mostly within global averages, with some exceptions. Wine is very expensive because everybody drinks it. Luxury clothes are cheaper than rags. Actually, I should really fix that. I'll export them. Alright, I've sold a bunch of luxury clothes to France. The price is now reasonable. So this is of course important because it makes it so, yes, the standard of living goes down for the people that are buying these luxury clothes, but I think he says it here, going up. There's no sense in having really cheap luxuries. The pops who actually need them can afford to pay more. The people producing the luxuries aren't paid well if supply eclipses demand, right? So he, with this move, has sort of taken money out of the pocket of the owners of the factory and out of the pockets of the people that aren't buying these luxury clothes, but he has given money to the poor, to the people that are actually working in the factories, and that is pretty good. That makes it so he has a stronger tax base. He can, later on build up a stronger economy with people that have more access to, just in general to education and to wealth as it stands. That's odd. Both Bavaria and Belgium are having revolutions that appear to be peasant revolts. Damn. Leave Bavaria, leave the King Ludwig alone, okay? So France will probably, France is probably the world's largest wine producer. Yeah, France is by far the largest producer of wine. Agrarianism has a 30% chance to pass this year. Not terrible, but also not likely. How many states are currently owned by the Pope? Same 3 I started with. So that would be Romagna, Umbria, and I forgot the last one. Either way, nationalism will hopefully give me a couple more. The United States of America has been restored. So, Revolutionary America, as I said, has returned to not being Revolutionary America. I assume that Revolutionary X is just the nomenclature that is used for any revolution in any country, right? It then returns to the name United States of America. And they have won. The Emperor has been deposed. The New Republic is led by a very powerful intelligentsia with support from the surprisingly relevant trade unions. So, they're essentially progressive liberals. What happened between the UK and the United States of America? The war ended when the Emperor surrendered, so there was nothing pushed towards the UK. The devastation of the American Civil War has left the restored Republic quite weak. I actually outranked them with my glorious art. I'm actually very curious. I'm going to check out American laws. The United States of America seems to have a lot of legacy laws from its time as an empire, and it's trying to pass migration controls to appease the trade unions. I assume related to, the topic of them wanting to have the power to work in their own location. Slavery has not been abolished. This is a really, really strange United States of America. Whatever happened to the Emperor, and then you can see very dead, again, will never pop up because the next one would be randomly generated. Literacy is up to 40%. Surprised it continued to increase at all. So there might be another civil war in the US. Very possible. They are also currently fighting the great Sioux nation. I know it's not Sioux. Shux? My apologies. Again, I don't actually know how to pronounce it. Right away, Modena has decided they'd like to confederate with us, so I get some infamy for annexing them, but it's not a lot. Parma has joined as well, and Garibaldi is on our side. So there are two things here that are interesting. I wonder how the calculation for I would like to confederate is done by the AI. Maybe nationalism gives you a greater reason for them to want to confederate, right? Because that gives them nationalistic feelings further and makes it so that they might want to do it. Maybe it's related even to the people that are in government. That would be pretty good. In my opinion, if they aren't nationalistic minded, then why would they want to be annexed? You know, Bavaria, for example, in particular, when it comes to 1870, 1871, did not desire to be a part of Germany. They wanted to stay independent, and the people in power also, of course, were, you know, into this direction. So that is King Ludwig, and of course, everybody that supported, you know, his government there. But it has to be said that they didn't have a choice. Now, this confederation is very deliberate, or rather, is very made out of free choice. At least it seems this way. And this makes me wonder, I do hope that diplomatic actions and diplomatic pacts, as we have them here, are influenced by how the actual interest groups feel about them. I hope that the diplomatic layer is not in an isolated, on an isolated level, right? That would be pretty good. Right, Garibaldi is now on his side, so Garibaldi is spawned. Is Garibaldi guaranteed to spawn? If you don't know Garibaldi, he was one of the leading generals of Italian unification. I believe he actually made it so that two Sicilies, you know, fell into line and became a part of the unified Italy. Under the right conditions, he can spawn. Better the Pope than disunity. Garibaldi in this timeline, that appears to be his stance. Neither Sicily nor Sardinia are anywhere close to their unification movements. Right, pretty interesting. Unification movements. Is that just phrasing, or does that mean there are certain movements that start once you have nationalism? We do not have the bureaucratic capacity to handle our new citizens that he just annexed. Guess we need more government administrations. Doing all this without good tax laws is quite painful. How's your relationship with Austria? Because they do hold Lombardy and Venice. Relations with Austria are cordial. They continue to occupy Lombardy and Venice. We just annexed Tuscany. So now we have these three unified. The Roman market is becoming an expanded papal state. Tuscany, Parma, Modena, that's all of Central Italy, right? Still waiting on Lucca. And there goes Lucca. Central Italian unification achieved. Look at them. As you can notice, it went incredibly fast. As soon as he was in possession of nationalism research, so nationalism tech. Is that related? I don't know. I have to assume it is, right? I knew, or at least I believe to know, that once you have nationalism, because this is just inferred here, right? You get the diplomatic play that is unification. So, for example, in Germany, in Italy, you get a play that allows you to annex others, maybe for less infamy cost, maybe at a higher chance of success, right? To actually annex them. Does it come with more likelihood? Does it come with more tools in your toolbox that are friendlier than a diplomatic play? I'm not certain. But what I can tell you is it clearly worked, and it went incredibly speedily. As soon as he was in a position of having nationalism, boom, 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 all of a sudden, they were all in. And the papal room was filled with the other papal countries, the other Italian countries. What's going on in France, lol? Look at this. We have a war here. So this is Sardinia-Piedmont. This is Austria, and I believe this is Austria-occupied Western Switzerland. And they're at war. Austria is trying to puppet a German minor, and France doesn't like that. Why is France also at war with Switzerland? Switzerland is an Austrian puppet. Oh, right, okay, so this is an Austrian puppet right there. Right, hope France wins. That's interesting. I suddenly have money. I guess the unification has improved the economy. Tuscany has low market access. Previously being a national capital, it got extra infrastructure, but now under the papal states, it's just a state. This means I'll actually need to build a railway. In the meantime, I'll enact a decree for road maintenance, so that is done via authority. I consider a unification war, but I'd rather wait until France isn't busy because he wants France's help. He has good relationship to them, a trade agreement and whatnot, so France might help the Pope here. With France being at war with Austria, wouldn't that be better? Right now, France and Austria are busy fighting each other. I don't have the ability to fight either of the Italian powers on my own since all my money goes into art. I really like this war goal, hope it gets enforced. So this is within the war between France and Austria, so you can take a look at the war goals that are a part of wars that you're not a member of, similar to CK3, for example, right? And this is Liberate Lombardia. That's a big one. I mean, that would make it so that this entire region here is free, and then he can annex that if, you know, it also works via the nationalism focus, or whatever it is. Again, not a focus, but rather whatever he did to the other Italian minor states. This one is less interesting. I believe this is Württemberg, right? The Württemberg and Baden. It's one of the two, and I keep confusing them, and people keep being upset. My apologies. This is Krakow, right? I believe, oh my god, they actually made Krakow's flag darker, didn't they? Krakow's flag and Bavaria's flag were the same color. This is darker. Unless the screenshot is fudged in any way, like, you know, the color scheme is ruined, they actually made it darker. Big fan. Now we can tell that it's not Bavaria. I am researching central archives to improve my government administrations. Expanding the buildings is much less efficient than having better production methods. There we go. Rome has become quite attractive to migrants lately. We have some Poles, Germans, and Slovenes. Let's talk about this. The Papal States are not liberal. In a sense that they haven't passed many liberal laws. There's not, you know, much voting, there's not free speech, none of that, at least not that he mentioned. In Victoria too, primarily what would happen with migration is, of course, they would go to the New World. Now, in this scenario, in Victoria 3, with a more complex migration system, with the full system, with the market migration system, right, if you know about those, if you read the dev diary, we are looking at a multi-layered system of migration that is more complex and doesn't just funnel people into the colonies. But it also has to be mentioned, the United States of America have just ruined themselves in this playthrough. Think about it, right? The United States of America had a civil war. They have repressive laws. They have a lot of legacy laws from the empire. It's maybe not the best place to be. The Papal States, on the other hand, I mean, okay, and he says it here as well, I believe, the papacy is really quite tolerant when it comes to culture. So long as you are Catholic and vaguely European, you're accepted in Rome. Look at this. He is able to get a migrant stream that otherwise in other, you know, migration systems, even Imperator Rome, but also, of course, Victoria 2, wouldn't be viable. That would not occur. Stellaris doesn't make these decisions either. But right now, this is the ideal playthrough for this. France is ruined. The UK will be ruined. You will see that in a second. The United States of America have ruined their economy, meaning the standard of living goes down, meaning it's not as attractive to migrate there, even if they give many rights to people. Now, why would people, especially these culture groups, migrate to the papacy? Poles, Catholic. And also suppressed in the Russian Empire, in Austria, in Prussia. Germans, currently at war. Everything sucks. If you're Catholic, you might want to go to the papacy. Slovenes, currently at war. Everything sucks. Austria is losing. You are being sieged down. Things are bad. You migrate to the papacy because you are Catholic. Pretty cool stuff. You get a lot of migration here if you want that, if you are looking into that. I mean, actually, now I think about it, the United States were literally trying to pass migration control, making it even harder for them, despite already being in a bad standard of living situation, to actually get any migration. This is pretty neat. Wouldn't have been possible in Victoria 2. Is possible here. I like it. How is France versus Austria going? Very well for me. France is winning. They also have help from Sardinia as well. Oh, and also Prussia, but they're not a negotiating party. Wow, Austria was actually hoping to subjugate Prussia in the war. That is not going to happen. If it gets enforced, who will get Lombardia? It's released as an independent nation, and I will attempt to unify with them. Austria gradually dropping its war goals as defeat becomes inevitable. My god, these borders. So, what can we see here? Württemberg gets... Bavaria and then Lombardia is free. This is the most important part. Now, it's good news that you can take the capital of your enemy. That is good news. That is really good news, okay? You can take it. Isn't guaranteed necessarily, but it works. I do wish that we could have war goals that are not entire state regions, because, listen, I love it, but I also hate it, and I mean, we don't even need to talk about this, right? So Switzerland also is free again. That's pretty good, but I hope you know what I mean. Obviously, there's a great Bavaria, there's a huge Bavaria, an excellent Bavaria, but I wish we could take provinces rather than state regions, and we've talked about this as well on the channel before, that the population is obviously calculated on the state level rather than the province level, but they have a way of at least assigning population to state or to province levels because they know where these pops are working, right? If we could had like, maybe you can't choose per province, right? But what if you had like 3 regions per state region and you can split the state in those regions? Because otherwise you will never get France's ideal borders, which is of course along the Rhine, that sort of stuff, right? And you will get this, rather than maybe, I don't know, like, you know, this, something like this. I don't know. My personal opinion is just, I would really like to see that. Right now, I can tell you, the AI obviously is more aggressive. Would this happen in other games? Maybe not. Maybe it would happen. I don't know. Depends on how they balance it. Depends on how it works out. But I will tell you, it doesn't look too pretty. It just doesn't look too pretty. Austria barely has any Austria left. They're down to Styria. How's America doing? They're losing a war. The Civil War really messed them up. What are the Sioux war goals? They want to annex large swaths of the Midwest. Probably will be succeeding here. Damn, can you see the casualties of the Civil War? I think around 500,000 people died or were wounded. The USA are absolutely, it's a disaster for them. A true disaster. America is a troubled nation. Devastation and unrest are still high. Another civil war is likely. The first papal railway now runs between Florence and Arezzo. Did France ever sort out Paris? Is it still a giant furniture sweatshop? Now it's a bigger furniture sweatshop with trains. People in France are incredibly poor. The British Empire is now in crisis. As you can see, it's a chaos AI situation. There is something in the numbers, something that is tweaked here or that isn't tweaked that gets everybody to crash. Quebec and the East India Company are revolting with Spanish and Brazilian support. So we will never learn, although it would be very interesting, we will never learn whether the East India Company will then become an Indian nation or whether it will stay basically a colonial British nation but without Great Britain. I would wager that, historically speaking, the EIC would completely collapse without its purpose in the British market. It would have... I mean, the British literally, after the EIC had bad policies and it led to the rebellion in India, literally just discarded the EIC, right? So they clearly were in control. But in this scenario, could the EIC do it without the British market? I kind of doubt it. But there's Spanish and Brazilian support, so that is pretty big. What about China? How are they doing? Imploded due to a bug. Remember, they were at war with Russia over Kazakhstan, and now they're gone. A lot of bugs, again. This will screw with the migration, with POPs, with the industry, with the economy. So, hey, again, no numbers are final. Any bug will distort the actual gameplay experience, but it's still fun to watch. Large numbers of Poles are migrating to Ceylon. I have to assume it gives them more rights there. What is this world? Poles do tend to migrate a lot, though, due to their discriminated status in the Russian Empire. Practically anywhere else is better, and they can't go to the US. They could go to the Papal States, which they are doing. France is very poor. Maybe they could go to Spain, but might also be repressed. The UK is having trouble as well. Maybe Ceylon is just truthfully the best option. Things are worse for Britain than I thought. They're facing a revolution on Britain itself, with the revolutionaries demanding a republican government. The revolutionaries appear to have the upper hand. The loyalists only retain Yorkshire, the home counties, and the West Country. Ireland has also risen up, demanding independence. Great Britain is gone. Ireland has selected King Dennis Pendergast as its sovereign. Lombardy has joined our customs union, which boosted relations enough for them to accept an alliance. We can expect annexation to follow. I assume, honestly, this reads to me as though it's just like a normal... Imagine it like EU4, basically, right? You look at it, oh, improve relationships to X, and then you can say, I will annex you, it takes some time, you need to put some resources in, some capacity, right? And then you can do it. That's at least the way it reads to me. That was fast. Lombardy has joined the Papal States. Can you form other tags like Italy? I don't have enough states to form Italy. Finally, central archives. We no longer have massive tax base from insufficient bureaucracy. I will address this. The fact that you need all of the states to form Italy, I will address that later in the last part, because that's where you actually see it in action. As a result, we actually have some money. We also just acquired this, arms industry in Lombardy. That is sizable. That is how you build an army. I won't give an explicit information on how Italian unification works, but it does at least seem to be working. Hey, listen, Daniel, you should tell us. Just slip it out, okay? Oh, didn't mean to type that, right? Something like that. I would love to know how that works, but maybe it's related to the journals, and maybe it's related to the institutions of, for example, Italian nationalism. Maybe Rome, similar to how Rome became the focus of realism, you know, the realism movement. Maybe Italian unification also has a capital that is the central. And maybe then you can just push and push and push, and people are more likely to align up with you. I have no idea. I'm literally just guessing. I think this will be the end of this episode of Prestigious Pope. I might very well return to this again, with the next session focusing on military build-up and a play to annex Sicily and Sardinia. Trust me, the next episode, so the last video that will come out tomorrow here on this channel, is way different from what we've had so far. This was economy, and then everybody else collapsing. The rest one will be war, will be unification. It will be interesting, trust me. The year is, by the way, 1849. One last screenshot, Italy in the year 1849. I'll be real with you, of course it's fast, but I will also tell you if you play Victoria 2, you can unify Italy very, very fast before 1849. Papal States, okay, so pretty good looking, I gotta tell you. Two Sicilies, haven't really done much. Sardinia, Piedmont hasn't done much, but they have been in wars, which kept them busy, of course. Now, this was it here for today. Let me know what you think about the points that I brought up, about the things that we talked about the things that we have seen here. Very interested in all of these mechanics being in and the game playing as interestingly as it is. Maybe we are closer to release than I was thinking as well. Now, either way, I don't know. I'll see you later, alligator.